I'll admit everybody now.
Okay,
Have fun.
perfect. Thanks. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Spark Shift Succeed. My name is Malt Sodetse, and it is an absolute pleasure to be hosting you today. At USBI, we believe that powerful conversations can challenge the way we think, work, and lead. And today's conversation is focused on something we all need more of: time. In today's always-on workplace, being busy has almost become a measure of success. The full calendar, endless meetings, constant pressure to deliver more faster. But behind this culture of constant busyness is a growing challenge that many organizations are facing, and that is burnout. The reality is that when people are constantly operating at full capacity, productivity will suffer. More hours do not always create better outcomes. So the question we need to ask ourselves, are we truly being productive, or are we simply becoming better at being busy? And most importantly, how do we create the space to perform at our best without burning out? Now, that is exactly what today's session is about. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Rayner, joining us from Australia. Anne is a globally recognized productivity expert, former C-suite executive, and founder of Productivity Bargain. Before launching Productivity Bargain, Anne was a senior leader at Global Data Insights, powerhouse Kantar, where she served as CEO of some of their fastest growing markets across APAC. She has transformed businesses across Malaysia, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Sydney by unlocking human potential and redesigning the way people work to drive performance, and has led 4-day multinational mega sprints with 150 experts, delivered significant business turnarounds, and even had a conference room full of researchers dancing a conga line without saying a single word. Now, without further ado, help me welcome Anne. Anne, over to you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. It's so great to be here. And as you said, this is a topic that everyone is feeling in our bones, is becoming more and more of an issue. Now, I'm not a magician, but I am known for giving people 5 to 8 hours of time back in their work weeks. But before I give you the strategy to do that, let me invite you to think back to a time when you did something that everyone told you couldn't be done. Someone who can write the book on just getting on and doing what others think is impossible is Jason Merkley. So let me introduce you to Jason. Jason grew up in French-speaking rural Canada, and at 17 he followed his dream to join the army, and he loved everything about army life. He loved the physical tests, he loved the camaraderie, he loved the big toys. But one day, shortly after his 21st birthday, Jason said he was driving home and he felt like he was in a blizzard because white spots kept clouding his vision. That was the last time he ever drove. He had to leave the army because his vision deteriorated until he was left with only 5% vision, legally blind. But Jason's not one to let the world dictate what is possible. So he picked himself up, and over the next few years he went traveling, he lived and worked abroad, he went to university, became a high school English teacher, and moved to Australia, where he met my sister, who is there, Jenny. And he loved working in Australia as a teacher, and his students loved him. But 8 years in, a new principal started at his school, and she didn't see that he was an excellent teacher, but only that he was blind. And so she forced him out of teaching and of the school. And what followed after there were a number of similar setbacks where people didn't have the vision to see what Jason could contribute. But as I said, he's not one to let the world dictate what is possible. So this year, aged 50, actually, end of last year, aged 50, Jason went back to study, this time as an exercise physiologist. And as part of the program, he had to secure a prac position. And at first, it was the same thing. Oh, how can he do this if he can't see if they're doing the exercises right? But eventually, Jason found an organisation that did have some vision to see what was possible, an aged care dementia home. And on the first morning, he turned up early, met the physio he would be assisting, Kate. And Kate said his job was going to be to follow her as she set exercises for the residents, because often these stubborn elderly nursing home residents just simply refuse to do their exercises.
So daai e-mail wat Mabel gekry het van verslae. Die volgende oggend is dit in my inbox.
Sorry, please keep your microphones on mute. Thank you so much. Sorry, Anne, you are on mute now. Sorry about that. Perfect.
Can you hear me? Yep, great. Lovely. So Jason is this big, buff, muscly guy, shaved head, Canadian accent, big smile, and he loves to chat. So he sat down next to the first resident and he made friends with her. And after a little while, he said, you know, you're going to have to do the exercises, right? Would you like to hold on to me while you do them? Oh, yes, dear. And the next minute, this stubborn, elderly, frail lady was holding on to Jason's muscled arms as she did every exercise the physio had set her. Meanwhile, Kate was able to move on to the next resident and set their exercises, after which Jason came and worked his magic on them too. The ladies just loved him. And by the end of that first day, Kate saw the impact that Jason had had on her practice and had the vision to offer him a paid position in a job he loves. And after years of people literally telling Jason that what he wanted to do was impossible, he showed that possible is only limited by imagination and determination. And he taught me that when you boldly show up and decide to do things differently and rethink what is possible, you can make more of an impact for yourself and the people around you than you ever thought possible. So my personal moment of rethinking what is possible and how work works happened halfway down an abseil rope. So it was in June 2018, and we'd taken my team, these emerging leaders, into the jungles in Thailand to take them out of their comfort zone and into their learning zone. And one of the training exercises was to zip line across the roof of a cave and rappel down 50 meters into the darkness below. So my turn came. I stepped off the ledge. I ziplined across the roof of this cave, and the next minute I found myself clinging in fear to the roof of this cave, while Josh, our trainer and coach, disconnected me from the zip line, attached me to the rappel rope, and set me off. So I took a deep breath, grabbed the abseil rope, and holding on as tightly as I could, I began inching my way down. And it wasn't long before my arms were shaking and my palms were sweating. I kept going down this endless rope, and after an eternity, Josh called down, "You're doing great, Anne. You're halfway there." What? Halfway? I can't keep going. I'm going to fall. Eventually, I made it to the ground and I just collapsed in tears of relief. I couldn't pretend to lead anyone when I was such a mess. So I just headed off to the side of the cave and leant my head against the cool wall, and I watched the rest of my team come down the rappel rope. And they were doing it so easily. They were sliding down, they were having fun, they were smiling, they were high-fiving at the bottom. And as I sat there, I realized that I had actually made it harder for myself by holding on tightly, by working harder, by trying to control things when I was scared. And that was the moment I realized we've been sold a lie. We've been told that to be successful, to get ahead, you have to work harder, you have to put in the hours, you have to be always on, you have to hustle. But the truth is, not only are we making it harder for ourselves than it needs to be, all that incremental effort delivers less impact than we think. And when the status quo of work is that we will continually need to do more with less, something will break unless you choose to work differently. And what I'm going to share with you in the limited time we have together today is a strategy that is going to change your game. Because when you understand that time is your superpower to unlock commercial results, and that there is a strategy that you can implement as fast as you like, then you can walk out of here knowing that you no longer have to make a choice. You can deliver outstanding results without burnout. But to do that, you're going to need to think differently, like Jason. And once you have started to think differently, you're going to be looking for a strategy. And the strategy is this: design for time. Now, there are 3 simple building blocks to design for time. First, the constraint of time as a catalyst for looking at how you work and what you work on in order to do better. And this is what changes the game from just running faster to working smarter. Second, a productivity bargain. And this is what incentivizes and empowers your whole team to solve the inefficiencies and the frustrations of their role together. And the third element is to shift the system, not the individual, because one person alone can't get control of their work schedule. We're all operating in the same system of chaos. But when you change the culture around how time is valued in an organization, magic happens. But here's the important thing: you need all 3 elements in order to design a commercially resilient business and create that time and space in the work week. So I'm not going to have time to unpack all 3 elements for you today. So I'm going to focus on the constraint of time, and I'm going to give you a few tools to shift the system. Who here has been a student on a deadline? Yeah, it's amazing what you can achieve when time is constrained, right? And this is what the constraint of time is all about. It's about turning time into a tool that we can use to help us work smarter. But to unlock the benefits of the constraint of time, we need to identify and break some of the hidden beliefs that we all hold about how work works. For example, the belief that output equals hours. But in fact, the relationship between hours and output is not linear. In 1926, 100 years ago this year, Henry Ford did an experiment. He had his factories working 6-day weeks, and then he moved them to 5-day weeks, and then back to 6-day weeks, and then to 5-day weeks. And eventually, after rigorous experiments, he concluded that shorter work weeks delivered more output from his factories than the longer ones. And so our 5-day week was born. So the myth that hours equals output was busted 100 years ago. And modern experiments with further reducing working hours have shown similar results. And one of my favourite ones is by a guy called Chris Bailey, who is literally obsessed with productivity. And he did an experiment on himself where he worked 90-hour weeks one week, and then 20-hour weeks the next week, and then 90 and then 20. And what he found 2 really interesting things. The first one was that he achieved nearly the same amount of outcomes in the 20-hour weeks as in the 90-hour weeks. The extra 70 hours delivered minimal return on effort. But the second thing he found was really interesting as well, which is that he felt so much more productive in the 90-hour weeks. And so he was so surprised when he looked at the data and realized he had actually delivered about the same amount of outcomes. Now, he didn't say done the same amount of things. He didn't just tick more things off his to-do list or tick the same amount of things off his to-do list, but the critical outcomes, he achieved the same amount in 20 hours as in 90 hours. And this is why the belief that longer hours equates to better work is so hard to break, because we're conditioned that feeling busy is the same as being productive. And so working more or longer is the way to achieve this. And what we need to do is actually rethink productivity. And instead of believing the world when it tells us that productivity is doing more things, we need to be clear that productivity is delivering our key outcomes in less time. So constraining time is not about running faster. It's about building your productivity muscle, like switching on a setting for continuous improvement. And it's a setting the Japanese seem to have mastered. So the Japanese consumers have the most refined palates in the world, and they can taste when sashimi fish has been frozen on the way to market. And so the fishermen built saltwater tanks on the boats to keep the fish alive on the way to market. But in those safe tanks, the fish became lazy and they stopped swimming fast and their muscles softened, and Japanese consumers could taste the difference. So the fishermen put a small shark in the tanks. They lost one or two fish on the way to market, but the remaining fish were forced to stay sharp and swim fast. You want yourself and everyone in your team to be like the fish, sharp and focused, thinking, what is the most important thing to use my time for right now? But first, you have to decide. You can't wait until one day when you will feel like you have enough time to do this, because you and I both know that day will never arrive. It will never feel like you have the time. The constraint of time is your shark at work. So unless you put that shark in the tank and start to build your productivity muscles, you will never create that time. Now, the second pillar, as I said, is a productivity bargain. And this is the mechanism which unlocks that all-in mindset in a team and harnesses all the amazing brains that you have around you to continually find more productivity improvements. So I won't cover that now. If you want to know more about that part, I'm very happy to answer questions about it later. But I do want to make sure that we have time to talk about how to shift the system. How do you create that magical time? Well, this was a question that my hairdresser, Zig, asked me. He was following the work hard playbook. He was working 13 hours a day, 6 days a week, and he was exhausted. And he didn't think he could realistically constrain his time. He said to me, well, I'm a hairdresser. I earn money when I cut hair. This will never work for me. But as we started to systematically identify and implement improvements, he realized something fundamental. It's not about the time you don't work. It's about the return on effort from the time you do work. And the way to increase the return on your effort is something that you can be really systematic about. You can systematically audit your work, your business, to identify what productivity problems or frictions you need to solve to unlock meaningful time. What are the things that are getting in your way of delivering the outcomes you need to? Zig was able to reduce his working hours by 30% and sales did not drop, and he is still doing that to this day. More importantly, he made time to go to the gym, which he loves, and to spend time with his wife, Gillian, who he also loves. And because he has the time and the mental space to feed his creative side, he launched a long-time passion project, which is his wedding hair business. To effectively find those ways to create time, what you need to do is apply a different lens to look at your business and your work and see how work happens and where those frictions are. And there are 4 productivity pillars that you can use to see your work with different eyes, those different lenses, and uncover the root causes of busy. And I'm going to share those with you now. The first is creating and protecting time for deep work, for where you create the real value. The second is systems, processes, automations, and yes, AI, which I bundle under the term of working smart, because it's not about what the system is right now. It's about, do you have that culture of continuous improvement in your systems? Third is interpersonal effectiveness, which I always say is the biggest productivity lever that we never call a productivity lever. And the fourth is well-being. This is mental, physical, social well-being, and essentially that's about supporting you to bring your A game and work at a higher intensity when you are focused on work. So this is a systems lens approach to productivity growth. It's not trying to fix an individual or learn a productivity trick. It's identifying and prioritizing which problem to solve. And that is how you shift the system. And it's urgent that we shift the system. 1 in 2 of us globally has experienced burnout. And we were talking about how everyone is feeling this pressure ratcheting up this year. And it has a social cost measured in each and every one of us that goes home stressed and exhausted by the hours that we're spending in busy. Like my friend Jen from high school. Jen spent 3 years in and out of hospitals after stress and distress triggered an autoimmune condition to flare up. And doctor after doctor, test after test, all they could do was treat the symptoms, but they didn't know what was wrong with her. And after a long time, on advice from a reflexologist, Jen saw on advice from a kidney specialist, Jen saw a reflexologist called Anne, great name, and Anne said to Jen, "What's wrong?" And Jen just sighed, "No one knows. No one can figure it out." So Anne simply said, "Okay, well, we'll treat the whole of you then." A light bulb moment. All the doctors in the health system had been treating symptoms, a part of her. But what if a better way was treating her as a whole human? And it worked. Treating her holistically gave Jen back her quality of life in a way that treating the individual symptoms had never been able to do. And too often we act like those doctors. We're treating the symptoms of busy and burnout and productivity and not the root causes. Need more revenue? Work longer. Try a new initiative. Invest in technology. Are your people struggling? Oh, well-being budgets. Training, flexi days should fix that. But we are becoming busier and busier and more burnt out, and productivity is flatlining. So when performance is non-negotiable and burnout is unacceptable, our only choice is to shift the system and design for time. And if you are going to design for time, you need to be willing to throw away the traditional beliefs that you might hold about how work works, like I learned halfway down that abseil rope, because those beliefs are a recipe for inefficiency and burnout. Like Jason with his old ladies. When you are willing to try things differently and reimagine what is possible, you can have more of an impact than you ever thought possible. So I want you to walk out of here with the belief that you can work differently. Because what you have in your hands is a strategy that works. All it requires is to take the first step. So are you willing to try it? Back to you, Melissa.
And thank you so much for that incredibly thought-provoking and powerful session. It was so practical. For me, I think one of the biggest takeaways today is that productivity is not simply about doing more or working longer or filling every moment of the day. It's about creating that right environment you spoke about, that system, those habits that allow people to perform at their best sustainably. And you spoke about how to create that system. It was such an incredible session. And thank you so much. I also love the way you highlighted such an important shift in that thinking, that constant busyness does not always equal meaningful progress. And it's definitely something all of us can relate to because we're all in high performance environments where we're driven by targets, deadlines, client expectations, and the pressure to constantly deliver. And I think it is very easy to fall into that belief that more hours automatically mean better results. So thank you very much for challenging us today. And thank you so much. I'm about to visit the chat. Let's see what our audience has to say. We do have a question from Paul. Paul's asking, and if there was one productivity habit you wish every leader would stop doing tomorrow, what would it be?
A productivity habit to stop doing. I think the biggest derailer is to start your day being reactive rather than proactive. And one of the most powerful things is to be intentional about what is the most important thing to spend your time on, not what is top of your email inbox, but what is the outcome that is most important to achieve. And so I think reframing what you need to do from what are the tasks or the inputs and getting absolute clarity on what are the outcomes and quarantining time to do those things, I think that will have the most durable impact on sustainable productivity.
Thank you so much, Anne. We really appreciate that. We have another question from Jeff. Jeff is asking, is it all about finding the key tipping points in one's approach to productivity? This is surely also powered by one's self-belief and fueling one's desire to achieve personal excellence. Do you agree, Anne?
So I actually don't agree. And I'll tell you why. It's not that I don't think what you've said there, Jeff, is not true. It's just that I think the most powerful shift that we don't really think about from a productivity perspective is what happens in a team, because each of us individually are operating in this system of work that creates busy that's out of our control. So this is an actual stat. One email creates 7 more emails. One meeting often creates more meetings or has people in it that don't need to be in it. And we all feel this, right? We know that this is the case. And so no matter how much discipline, boundaries, productivity, expertise one individual has, unless you work as a team and shift the system and the culture around how time is valued, it's really difficult to create that meaningful change.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And we have a comment from Nikki that anchors us. Wow, what a powerful session. What a brilliant way to start the week. So thought-provoking. Thank you, Anne. And Jeff said, preach, sister. Thank you so much for that. And I know we're out of time, but I've got a few questions from myself. And it's such a sensitive topic, right? Burnout, productivity. And you spoke about creating a system that allows people to perform at their best, one that balances deep work, smarter ways of working, meaningful connection, and well-being. For professionals who are always operating in high pressure environments with targets and deadlines and constant demands, where should they start? What is the first shift they can make to move from simply being busy to creating real impact?
So I love that question, Melissa, and we didn't practice this, but I do have a tool that everyone can use that I'm putting up on the screen now. This is a diagnostic that will take you through each of those 4 pillars for your team, for your work, and help you identify what is that one area of focus where you can unlock the biggest productivity gains. And so I'll leave that up there for everyone. If I was going to answer your question specifically, I think it would be about identifying what problem to solve, and this tool can help with that. But that would be my starting point. Where is the biggest friction? What is the thing that is getting in my way of delivering outcomes fastest? And is that in my control, or is that a team conversation? So that's where I would start. What problem do you need to solve?
Thank you so much. And I think it's also all about priority. Like you mentioned, what problems does one need to solve first? I think we spend our days focusing at all of the problems at the exact same time, and that's such a waste of time. So, and thank you so much for being with us. Charlie at the beginning asked us if this is for organizations or individuals. I think that you made it a beautiful framework for both professionally and in the corporate space. I love it. I think as we're in August, everyone is looking at the time, waiting for December to come just so they can have that big break. Everyone is so burnt out. They're just waiting to exhale. So this was a critical conversation for today. And thank you very much for spending time with us. I don't know if anyone has questions at this stage. We can spare 1 or 2 minutes for another question if anyone has a question or a comment. Okay. Going once, going twice. I think you answered everything.
Yeah. Well,
And
maybe just one, just one then, Melissa. So when it comes to AI and artificial intelligence, using all these various, some of them I find are really, really good. But where would you avoid to, where would you ask us to be careful, to exercise caution when we're using these tools from a productivity point of view? When does it sort of cross the line? Would be more my question.
Yeah, I love that question, because I think we're all feeling that AI seems to somehow be contributing to the stress rather than delivering on its promise of creating time for us. So for me, it goes back to actually the principle that I talked about before. What problem are you trying to solve? So I think a lot of organizations kind of throw AI at everything and see what sticks. And my perspective on that is, if it's not work that you should be doing anyway, if it's not that high value outcome that you need to deliver, it doesn't matter if you can do it faster or do more of it. It's not the right thing to be doing. So start by being super clear on what is the right outcome I should be focusing on. And then ask AI, how can you help me deliver that outcome faster or more effectively? And then that's the thing you should use it for. Do that one thing and then ask that question again. So that would be my advice, to be very intentional about what friction or problem you want AI to solve first.
That was a great answer. Thank you. It's very helpful.
And thank you so much. Quick question, perhaps as we wrap up quickly. One thing that many of us struggle with is giving ourselves permission to pause, right? I think we're pushing through those meetings, those deadlines and tasks without even taking a moment to reset. Because I think we always feel like we should be doing something. So maybe a question is, how important are breaks in creating sustainable productivity, and how can we build them into our day without feeling guilty?
Such a good question. And I could talk for days just on that question. So breaks, the science shows breaks are super important. So there are lots of experiments that show the most productive team or the most productive people actually work 4 to 8 hours, 4 to 6 hours a day, not 10 to 12 hours a day. When you are working, you may have heard of the Pomodoro technique. So if you block 2 hours out, the Pomodoro technique is something that actually builds a rhythm of focus and rest into those 2 hours so that your brain can sustain the effort for longer. So that rhythm of work and rest is absolutely critical. And there's lots of research that I can quote on the power of that. One of the reframes, though, that I would like to make around your question is, why do we think that having a break is not productive? And if you have a look at some of the most productive people in the world, like Warren Buffett, for example, he spends 80% of, or spent before he retired, 80% of his work week reading and thinking, because they were the most productive things he could do. Melanie Perkins, who's the co-founder of Canva, regularly blocks out an entire day of nothing, because that is when her brain does its best thinking and can innovate. And the more you start looking, the more you'll see examples of people that understand that intensity and then break is a really highly productive method. And if I can share one more example from sport, there's an Australian swimmer, and I just have to take the chance to brag about our swimming with the Commonwealth Games. And he's called Cameron McAvoy, and he actually retired because he was just burning out. And he came back to swimming, and instead of swimming 30 kilometers a week, he changed his training to swim 2 kilometers a week and learned from other sort of high intensity disciplines. And he is swimming the best, is in the best form of his life. He's breaking records, and the whole swimming community is picking up on his training methods. So I think there's a lesson in that for all of us, that breaks are not productive. Breaks can sometimes be the most productive things we can do.
Thank you so much. That is a sweet spot. And thank you very much. I love that. And Charlie just anchored what you just said, to say thinking time is really lacking, but so necessary. So yeah, what a powerful
Put that shark in the water.
Wonderful. And it's such a powerful way to start our Monday. And for those that stayed on, thank you very much for staying on for the extra minutes. I think each and every one of us wanted to invest more in this conversation. And I do wish we had more time. But thank you very much once again for sharing your expertise and giving us practical ways to rethink productivity, reduce burnout, and create the space to focus on what truly matters, because that's what success is. It isn't about being more busy. It's about creating that space to focus on what truly matters. So thank you for highlighting that. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope this conversation has sparked new ideas, shifted your perspective, and giving you practical tools to take back into your work and your teams. And don't burn yourself out while doing that. I guess we'll see you the week after next week, because this coming Monday, we are celebrating Women's Month in South Africa. So we will not be having a Spark Shift Succeed. And now, with that said, happy Women's Month to all the amazing women. And to everyone, we will see you on the 17th of August, same time, same place. Enjoy your week, everyone. Bye-bye.